All right. Thank you everyone for joining me tonight for this webinar. I know that many of you probably had a full day of work today, so I'm grateful that you took the time to come listen to me speak tonight. Special thank you to CEDIM as well for allowing me to be part of their innovation programs. I've been teaching at CEDIM for over 10, maybe 11 years now, and it's been a wonderful experience. For those that aren't familiar with the school or the program, I encourage you to look into it because they have wonderful programs, especially around innovation. So the topic of my talk tonight is how do you lead a culture of innovation now? And I say now because you can see in the background of the screen, it's an image of people meeting both in person and virtually. And over the last several years, I'm sure many of you many of the workplaces you are at have adjusted to a new normal in terms of how we work, whether it's a hybrid situation or more recently, many companies are starting to ask their employees to come back into the office. But many companies are still in this hybrid mode where some people are remote and some people are in the office. My company is an example. We have all three types. We have people that come in the office every day. We have people like myself that are coming into the office a couple times a month. And then we have people that are fully remote. So in an environment like that, culture is different. And before COVID hit and the world turned upside down, most of us were in an office every day and it was a different type of experience. But now, post-COVID, we are all still kind of adjusting to what this means and how we work together. So tonight I want to talk a little bit about what this new environment looks like and how you lead a culture of innovation in this new environment. Now, the reality is, I've spoken on this topic before, and I looked at some of the things I've mentioned before, and I would say the majority of it is the same. Leading and developing a culture of innovation, there are some basics that I'll speak about tonight that are still true regardless of if you're in the office or whether you're remote or hybrid. But then there are a few things that are different now that we are in this new world, and I'll speak to some of those things tonight. As we go, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Mayela will be monitoring them as we go. We will have time at the end to do Q&A, so I will make sure that we get to those questions as best as I can. So a little bit more about myself before I go into the topic. So on the left, you see a picture of me and a new friend I made a couple weeks ago on a farm. So as the introduction mentioned, I work for a company called Organic Valley, and we are a cooperative of 1,600 farmers across the United States. And I have the honor and pleasure of working on innovation to develop new food and beverage items to bring to the market that are not only healthy, but also support our small family farmers. So I really enjoy what I do because I get to meet interesting characters like this donkey I met. But I also get to meet many hardworking farmers that are working every day to bring healthy organic food to the marketplace. On the right side, you see a handful of logos of companies that I've either worked for or I've done consulting innovation work for. So I've had the opportunity to work across multiple industries, lots of food and beverage for sure, but also some technology, insurance, legal. And the interesting thing across all that is no matter where you go and when you look at innovation, the objective is always the same. It's looking for consumer insights or customer insights and problems that need to be solved and figuring out innovative ways to bring solutions to them, whether they're a product, a technology, a process, etc. So I've had a chance to see how different companies look at innovation. And so there's lots of different ways to approach innovation, but the basics of innovation still remain the same no matter where you go. But the cultures are all different, right? So some companies are very focused on innovation, and other companies obviously continue to do innovation, but maybe have a different priority or a process around it. So when I talk tonight, I'll share some of my personal experiences of different cultures of innovation that I've worked at. But it may or may not apply to you, depending on where you work and what type of environment you're in. So please keep that in mind as I share some of my stories. So I want to start with a story, and it's a story about innovation culture. So many years ago, I had an opportunity as a consultant to help a company work on some new innovation. And as part of that process, we asked a lot of questions, learned about some of their successes, and then also some of their failures. And one of the projects that we learned about was a multi-million dollar investment for some new technology that this company developed that they were very excited about. It tested very well with consumers. And then, so they launched it. But unfortunately, when it went into the marketplace, it did really, really poorly. And in the end, after 6 months, they decided to pull the product from the shelves and they canceled the product and the project. Now, the good news was they identified some really interesting opportunities and developed some interesting technology. The bad news was how they handled it. And so the stories that I heard about that project was that everyone on that team ended up getting fired. And it was because they had lost so much money and the leadership and executive team felt that they were responsible for that failure. So it was really interesting that this company went to that extreme, especially for innovation. And for those of you that have worked in innovation, you know failure is part of innovation. But you can only imagine what happens after a team of people get fired from launching something that failed. The next time someone has an idea, how do you think they feel? They're probably not as excited about trying something new. And most of the things they tried from that point on were very safe and very incremental. And so they never really expanded to anything that was truly risky or breakthrough. And the environment of people that worked on the innovation team was always in fear of making a mistake. So I'll talk a little bit more about another example later on in the webinar of how another company faced a similar situation. But I start there because culture is important, especially from an innovation perspective, and how you all as leaders react to not only successes, which is easy, but also failures. And so as an innovation leader, it's really important for us to learn from our failures. And then how we react and behave is key to creating a true culture of innovation. So I have a couple objectives for the talk tonight. Just very simply, I'm going to share some experiences of things that I've learned along my journey as an innovation leader. And then I hope I inspire some creative thinking and I challenge each of you to think about yourselves as innovation leaders and how you might apply some of the things I've learned or how you might practice some of these things to develop your own leadership skills and capabilities. So my talk is broken up into three key areas of leading a culture of innovation, and this is according to me. So there's lots of different aspects of leading a culture of innovation, but these are things that I've learned along the way that have helped me no matter where I go and no matter which company I work for. So I'm going to go through each of these. You're probably wondering what these might be. It's a mirror, a dog, and an engagement ring. So I'll go through each of these and explain how these can be keys to leading a culture of innovation. So the first one is starting by looking in the mirror. And that is all about you as an innovation leader. So developing a culture of innovation starts with yourself as the innovation lead. Now, some of you may be formally in an innovation team and be asked to lead innovation like the role I'm in. Some of you may be an executive in another group. Some of you may be the CEO of your company. But regardless of who you are, it all starts with you as an innovation leader. And there are two components I want to talk about as you look in the mirror. The first is what I call start with why, and the second is leveraging your strengths. So let's start with why. So there is a wonderful book out that's been out for a while, and there's a great TED Talk if you haven't seen it by Simon Sinek, and it's this book called Start with Why. And in this book, he talks about what he calls the golden circle, and that's what you see on the right side. And what you see is my golden circle as an innovation leader. So in the center, in the blue circle, is your why. And for me, my why is inspiring creative thinking. And you notice the why isn't a role or a title. It's really what wakes me up in the morning and gets me excited about going to work at Organic Valley is because I get an opportunity to inspire other people to think creatively. And that's my purpose. That's my why. The next outer circle is your how. So, how do I inspire creative thinking? Well, I leverage proven methodologies. I have a learning mindset. I love to ask questions. My alternate title at work is Chief Question Asker because I'm always asking questions because I'm just super curious about how things work and super curious about how we can make things better. I also love to invest in people through coaching. So I take the time to make sure that they are learning along the way, whether they're on my team or they're colleagues of mine. I love to challenge others to achieve big things. And lastly, I love to challenge myself to try new things. So along my journey in my career, I've always strived to find environments and opportunities that are new and interesting and challenging for me, so I can continue to grow. And then the last circle is the what. And that is what I do for a living and what I do on a day-to-day basis. So, as I mentioned, I'm the director of innovation at Organic Valley. I'm also a professor at CEDIM. I do some executive coaching. I volunteer, and I'm also a husband and a father to three boys. So that is your what. And if you watch the Start With Why TED Talk or read the book, you recognize and notice that most people, when they introduce themselves, and most companies, when they present themselves, start with the outer circle, the what. So think about the last time you introduced yourself at a meeting. It probably started with, "Hi, my name's Joe Kim. I'm the director of innovation at Organic Valley. I've been there for 2 years. I love to work on different types of projects and build, new ideas for innovation." That's typically how people introduce themselves and how companies present themselves. But what the book argues and what the Golden Circle teaches us is if you start with why, it starts to change how you present yourself and it starts to create a different feeling about the person that you're talking to or the company that you're working with. So for me, my introduction is, "Hi, my name's Joe Kim, and I love to inspire creative thinking. I ask a lot of questions. I take a learning mindset. I love to challenge myself and others. And I'm also the director of innovation at Organic Valley." So you can see in that slight switch, it changes kind of how you explain who you are and creates a different feeling about you as an innovation leader or you as a leader in general. So I would encourage all of you to read the book, watch the TED Talk, but most importantly, as an innovation leader, develop your own golden circle. Think about what your why is. And I will tell you that for some people, this is an easy exercise. For others, it can be a challenge because it requires you to really look in the mirror and reflect on what is it that drives you every day? What is it that gets you going in the morning, that excites you about doing whatever it is that you do and whatever role that you have in the company? So take some time, think about it. This Golden Circle version took me probably a year or so to really refine it and think about what my real passion and purpose is. So it takes time, but I feel pretty good about where it's at now because it's been a lot of time of reflection and looking back upon my career. The second piece of looking in the mirror is leveraging your strengths. So the picture you see, there are three very well-known famous people in the picture, but you probably only recognize two, and that's Mickey Mouse in the middle and then Walt Disney on the left. And the third person in the picture is Roy Disney, Walt Disney's brother. And for those that know the story behind Walt Disney and the company, um, you know that Walt Disney and Disney World and the Disney properties weren't all just Walt Disney. They were a combination of Walt and Roy working together. And the story goes that Walt was the visionary and had all the big ideas, and Roy was the integrator or the one that executed all the crazy ideas that Roy came up with. And there's a wonderful quote that I found of Walt when Roy came to him and said, "Hey, this is going to be a problem because it costs a lot of money and I'm not sure we can make it work." And Walt just says, "Roy, you look at the numbers, I'll build the dream." Right. And together they worked to create an amazing company, an amazing innovation uh, engine that continues to drive creative entertainment in the world today. But it wouldn't have been possible if both of them didn't work together, right? And so for you, it's to understand as an innovation leader what are your strengths? What are the things that you are really good at? So for Walt, it was being a visionary and coming up with creative ideas. For Roy, it was strength in numbers and operationalizing all these crazy ideas. So for you, if you happen to be a numbers person, then you might want to balance that and find people and surround yourself with people that are more creative and bigger thinkers, and vice versa. If you're a creative, you might want to find someone to help complement you and your strengths. And what I found is in my career, as I build my teams, it's really important to know what I'm good at and then what I'm not so good at. And I try to find people to build my teams so that we have a great complement of these strengths. So this is all based on this book you see on the screen called Strengths Finder, another book that I think is a great tool for leaders. There's an assessment you can take that identifies your top strengths. And what I do with my teams is I have them do the Strengths Finder assessment. We all share the information together, and then we start to recognize where our strengths are and where we have some gaps on our teams. So for us and for me, it's always been important to have a good balance. And then we use that to lead innovation and to start talking to other people about innovation to build out that culture. And this isn't, these strengths finders tools and things I'm sharing with you aren't only for innovation teams. They really are across all leadership in all aspects of your business. So they're good value regardless of if you're in a role in innovation or not. So the second key to leading a culture of innovation is the dog, and that is getting the top dogs on board. And those are the executives in your company. And it might be you, you might be the executive in your company. But the reality of developing a great innovation culture is it typically starts at the top. And so having executive support is crucial, at least in my experience, because without it, then innovation just becomes a word and maybe a couple bullet points on a poster that you put on the wall saying that we value innovation. But if the leadership and executive team don't support it, it typically doesn't go anywhere. So important to, as an innovation lead, to communicate frequently with key stakeholders, key executives. And now this is where this hybrid environment comes into play. It's important to do it in person and virtually. So before it used to be I could just walk up and meet with the executives and talk about the latest innovation projects we're working on. Now I have to be a little more deliberate and have to schedule time because we are not always in the same location. And so that's just a little bit of a different aspect of being a leader in today's environment, especially if you're in a hybrid organization. The example I want to give you here is I mentioned in the beginning the company that I worked for that fired the team that failed. But this is another example I want to share that is a little bit of a different approach to failure. So I'm not sure how many people on the call ever owned a Fire phone or even knew there was a Fire phone, but Amazon many years ago launched this Fire phone. And that's Jeff Bezos for those that don't know who leads Amazon. But he launched this Fire phone because he wanted to enter the smartphone industry. And it was a colossal failure, and there's a reason why you don't have a Fire phone today. But the key message here was Jeff Bezos challenged his team to think big, and he had a willingness to fail big in a very public way. But he used that failure as a learning engine, and he uses innovation as a way to develop longer term solutions and solving longer term problems. And so my understanding of the story goes that the Fire phone, although it didn't do well and was a failure by all accounts, they used some of the learnings and the technology and the capabilities they gathered throughout the process of launching the Fire phone to ultimately launch their Alexa product, their Echo. And so now many of us have Alexas or Echoes in our homes, and it is a relative success compared to what the Fire phone was. So on the screen, you see there's a quote here. If you double the number of experiments you do per year, you're going to double your inventiveness. And I just love that phrase because it embodies what a culture of innovation really is. It's about trying things and failing along the way, but making sure you capture your learnings from those failures. So think about next time you're in a meeting and someone presents something or a project goes colossally bad and it costs the company a bit of money. think about that investment you made and how you can leverage the learnings because you just spent a bunch of money investing in it. You might as well get the learnings from it. And the third key to the culture of innovation is getting engaged with your community. So you see the engagement ring. And there's a couple key points I want to share about engagement. So first and foremost, in this new hybrid environment and mixed environment of being in person and online, you really have to make an effort to connect in person as often as possible. So I mentioned I am someone that is part-time remote and part-time in the office. So I go into the office at least 1 week a month. And when I'm in the office, I make every effort to make every minute of my day connecting with as many people as I can, because as an innovation leader, it's really important to have conversations with other folks across the group as well as my own team. And so, as much as you can, make an effort to connect in person. But if you can't do it in person, then make sure you're deliberate about staying engaged on a virtual basis. The second point is getting aligned with key stakeholders. So it's one thing to be responsible for innovation, but it's a completely other thing to have alignment with other key stakeholders in my company to make sure they understand what I'm trying to accomplish from an innovation perspective and then how it impacts them as stakeholders in the business. Because innovation, my experience, is never a one man, one team, one woman job. It is a collection of an entire company working together because at some point, my big idea has to turn into a product that research and development has to go develop, and it has to turn into a win at my retailers that the sales team has to go sell, and my supply chain has to deliver. So ultimately, everyone is involved to deliver innovation, and they are all part of this innovation culture. And then the last piece is engage with your community both virtually and in person. So similar to that first point, I try to make an effort to connect in person as often as possible, but it really is not just people in the office, it's really engaging with the community at large. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So I mentioned getting aligned with key stakeholders. So as an innovation leader, it is really important to understand that I am not the only one that drives innovation for our company. I am responsible and accountable for building our pipeline, but the reality is many people in the organization support me and my team, and the ideas we develop and generate don't only come from the innovation team, they really come from all over the company, including the farmers in my company. And I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. So the importance of aligning with key stakeholders is I may get super excited about a project. I may have support by a couple folks, but if I bring it to finance as an example and they run the numbers and say, no, this won't work financially, it's dead in the water, at least for me, right? So it's important that I get alignment across all key stakeholders so that I can deliver successful innovation and that everyone is part of that. The other thing you see here is the I love HR. So human resources is also extremely important. Most people think HR is all about just annual reviews and policies and procedures. But what I found is HR from an innovation culture perspective is extremely important because they help set the tone for what our culture is in terms of the training they do and how they communicate with our employees. So I love to bring them along in the journey as much as I can. And then the last thing you see on the screen is an annual report. And if you haven't read your own company's annual report, I encourage you to do it, especially from an innovation perspective, because it's a great way, at least for me, when I've joined other companies or I've done consulting projects, it's a great way to understand how the company looks at innovation. And alignment with the way the company presents themselves from an innovation perspective is extremely important so that my job as an innovation leader aligns with what we're telling the world about what we do and how we look at innovation. And then, so the last part of this engagement is engaging with your community. So I mentioned that I would share some things that I do as an innovation leader in this hybrid environment. So a couple things I'll share here. First is the hybrid collaboration. So as an innovation leader in a hybrid environment, it is extremely important to get comfortable working in a virtual and in-person mode, and sometimes in both. And I'm sure many of you have already kind of adapted to this style, but in a leadership role, it's really important to learn how to use the tools effectively, develop agendas and exercises and ways to connect in a hybrid environment. So many times I've been in meetings pre-COVID where it's much easier because you're seeing people's faces and you're interacting with them. But once you start going to a virtual environment, the dynamic changes a little bit. So I have to be, as a innovation lead, very cognizant of who's on the screen, engaging with them, drawing them into the conversation, because it's really easy, I'm sure, as you have sat through many Zoom meetings, to get disengaged, and just say, well, I'm just going to sit and listen. I don't have to participate. But as a leader and to develop the culture, it's really important for me to draw them in and engage them. On the external side, one of the things that I've started to do in this environment is conduct virtual client collaborations. So in the past, again, it was get on a plane, go to your client, conduct these ideation sessions and innovation sessions. But now we're, again, in a different world. And the good news about this is, since everyone is so comfortable in a virtual environment, you can do this way cheaper. And it's much easier to get clients to commit to spending time doing these client collaborations. And I found that they're more amenable to it. But again, it's really important to create an engaging experience for them, because doing it virtually is a lot harder than doing it in person. The next you see is innovation tools. So there's lots of tools out there, not only from a collaboration perspective, but from an innovation management perspective. So how you track, how you manage, how you vet all your ideas and innovation. Or there are many tools out there that can help you do that. So I encourage you to leverage technology that's out there. Um, the next one is cross-functional innovation events. So what I've found from a culture development perspective is, the more you get diverse groups of people together, the more engagement you get and the more excitement you get around innovation. And as I mentioned, innovation is not a one-person job. It is a company-wide effort, at least in the places I've worked. I've stressed every time I introduce myself, I always tell the people in the company, welcome to the innovation team, because I believe truly that everyone in the company should be part of the innovation process, and they are part of the innovation team. And in general, innovation's fun and innovation's exciting. So people love to come to these events, and getting them engaged helps build uh, support for the ideas, as well as build excitement about new innovation. And then the next one is AI learning sessions. This is something relatively new that we've started to implement at my company, because AI is becoming so important in terms of innovation and saving time, but also thinking about and developing new opportunities in a very different way. And it definitely speeds up some parts of the process, not all of them, but many of them. And so we as a team are trying to get collectively smarter about AI. So every month we conduct an hour AI learning session, and we have different topics, and experts come in and teach us about AI and how to leverage those tools. And it's elevating all of our games in terms of our AI skills. And then the last one is the most fun thing I think that I'm allowed to do in my role right now, is conduct what we call farmer innovation sessions. So the picture I showed you at the beginning with the donkey, that was from one of my innovation sessions with one of our farmers on the farm. And it's really an opportunity to have a unique conversation with an individual that doesn't think about innovation or business the way I do, and the way most business people do, because they're so focused to being on the farm. But it's amazing to hear a different, unique perspective about what they think is opportunity and what they think innovation is. And we take that information and put that into our thinking and prioritization as we develop our pipeline. And then the other benefit to the farmers is they feel like they're more connected and engaged with our innovation processes. And now it starts to elevate the culture that we have at the company, because people are talking about innovation in a way that they feel like they are part of that community. So I shared a bunch of stuff here very, very quickly, I know, but these are just a couple examples of ways that I used innovation, or ways to develop culture within this new environment. And I would encourage you to think about your company, think about your culture, think about your leadership style, and figure out what are the unique things you can do to draw people in, to engage them in innovation and ultimately elevate the culture you have from an innovation perspective. So the last slide is where to start and some tips for success. So as I mentioned, every company has a different culture. So important for you to understand, how does your company look at innovation? What is the culture of decision making? What is the culture of success? What is the culture of failure? And then think about how you as a leader can start to craft your culture using your leadership skills and your style. Remember, it always starts at the top. So engage the executive team and the CEO as part of your innovation journey and developing the culture. Partner with key stakeholders, because innovation is not a one-person job. Uh, Leverage technology to stay connected, as I mentioned. There are lots of wonderful tools out there. AI is a wonderful tool to use as part of the process, but also different ways to stay connected with folks. And then lastly, be consistent and persistent. So changing culture and leading culture is not an easy thing, and it is not an overnight exercise. It requires consistent habits and behaviors that you implement over time, and people will start to get engaged and start to help develop that culture with you as a leader. So I went through a lot very quickly. Hopefully that all made sense. I saw there were a couple questions that were put in there. So that is the content of the webinar, but now I'd like to open it up for any questions that you might have, and I will do my best to answer them.